Okay. All right, I'm just gonna turn on my camera just to record it because last time we had issues, especially for the Seattle side. All right. So I'm gonna set up the third party kind of a recording, so we get recording. Okay. All right. Today we're gonna talk about Revit basic views. So, come on. Okay. Everybody knows what Revit view does. So basically, it's essential. It basically just display correct information. Unfortunately, not all views are made flexible. All right, that's the biggest challenge inside Revit is that how do you make it flexible so that you can transfer from one project to another or copy one view to another. It's just that sometimes once you set the view, it just fixed there, right? So here are just basically a couple of views that you can create in Revit. Okay, pretty much everybody knows this. Okay, if you take Revit training, this is pretty much all the views you can create. Now, the next chart is going to be interesting because I've been dealing with a lot of users from the past, and what happens is that here are some of the things that they never talked about. Is that what view works best? Let's say, for example, if you want to transfer one view to another, link them in, or etc. This wasn't mentioned anywhere inside on the web. So what I did is that I just basically create a list of what each view can do. Now the first column is that it says can create dependent views. Okay, you notice that's only plan, section, and elevation that you can create dependent views. The rest of them you just have to duplicate them. The next one is that you can reuse the same view within projects. Only two of them show up. One is schedule, the other one is legend. Now, Revit is very finicky, especially when it comes to reusing the same view over and over again. So that's the only two options you have. Non-duplicated view. Now, this is very interesting. It's only one that is you cannot duplicate. It's going to be the key schedule. Okay. So once you create a key schedule, you cannot duplicate that view. Okay, so it's stuck with one. The next one is going to be adapt to changing scale. All right, I put in 3D, but the thing is that if you are using perspective 3D, then it doesn't care what scale you're in. So that's kind of like one of those things that you cannot use scale to change stuff. Copy views to another project. Okay, so what I put in here is that section elevation can only be copied if there is a tag. When you copy the, let's say, section tags or elevation tags, you can actually transfer those information into another project. As you can see, all of this drafting, schedule, and key schedules, you can copy from project to project, which is really very nice. So if you have a good set of, like, let's say, details, or you have a set of schedule that you want to use for different projects, this becomes very useful. Next one is that view can reference from another project. Let's say, for example, you have a view from another project and you want to basically make them show up on your current project. Only 3 can make it show up. So the plan is probably the most obvious. But when you go to section elevation, what you have to do is that you have to duplicate the tags. So you have to recreate the section. Let's say, for example, in another project, you have a section. You can have to recreate them the same thing inside the current model. Okay, so it's going to be a double work for a lot of the users. View can be cropped. Now, this is very important. Sometimes what happens is that you have a large plan you want to basically crop down. So what happened is that when you look at this plan, section, elevation, 3D, you can crop it. But when you look at drafting, okay, let's say you create details and you want to crop them, there's no option to do that. Okay, just to keep in mind. Now, you could do the details in plan, section, or elevation, then you can crop it. That's fine. Adding views to annotations, again, you can just do it for all of this. View that can reference to a specific view. Now, callout itself, when you let's say you create a plan and you want to do a callout, what happens is that you can actually select callout to reference to another view. Okay, that is the only property where view can be referenced to another view. Now the last one is going to be the most important, because what happened is that people will delete stuff, okay, accidentally, and you have to find a way to recover them. Now the most critical is that sometimes when you delete floor plans, it's gone. You cannot recover it. So sometimes when users are doing a lot of this, you have to make sure that plan you don't accidentally delete them. The rest of the other views, so say when you delete them, you can still recover them. Okay. Later on, I'm gonna show you how to recover a camera view. So say for example, you for the newer project, you create a camera view and then you want to copy that same camera view into the older project just to see, okay, this is the before and this is the after. There's a way you can do that. The next column is just basically the subtype of the view. So you have area plans, floor plans, ceiling, structure, and then for section you have this different detail. This is kind of like the default template. If you're, let's say, using out of the box, this is what you're gonna get. Okay. Any questions so far between this?
No.
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna make this this documentation available to everybody. Okay, so you can just go through it, and then I put a lot of extracts in the write up because this is quite important. It's more to illustrate that what you can use for the views. Okay, let's do a demonstration. All right, let's start a new project. Am I in Revit? What version of Revit am I on? Sorry, I'm just going to close all of that stuff. Oh, I'm using 18, sorry. I have to use 17, or else I'll just accidentally upgrade. So when you use 17, do you run into any issues with the file corruption and such? Like basically when you close down Revit, it would just show you Revit stopped working. I ran into this issue a couple of weeks ago where every time I close the Revit, it would just say Revit encounter issue, it's going to close. This happens when I only close Revit. And when I open up a new project and then close that project, it also crashes. So what happened is that if you want to kind of fix that issue, you kind of have to get rid of the, there's a one called the site tools that Revit basically put in. You have to delete that, or else what happens is that you will encounter this crashing more often. Okay, there's no way of giving you any chance to save, unfortunately, because once you close a project, it automatically crashes Revit, and that, to me, Revit has no fix for that. Unfortunately, Autodesk has no fix, so they advise people to basically get rid of the site designer plugins, and then everything works. All right, so here I'm just going to go to a new project and say I'm going to use the architectural. So by default, you're going to have this view. Okay, that's fine. You can just draw it in. Okay, within this view, what I'm going to show you is kind of like, okay, what's the kind of like things to watch out for. One of the most basic things that a lot of users tends to get mixed up is the view range. Okay, one of the view range you kind of have to understand is that you have a cut plane, you have a top, you have a bottom, and then you have a level depth. So what happened is that this one, by default, I should change this to fraction so that our counterpart understood what is going on. So by default, this thing should be like 4 feet, or this is like 8 feet. Now, every time when you draw something, let's say for example you have a floor. Actually, let's try a roof. No. Let's say you draw a roof. No. And within this roof, you have like a material that is like a floor tile, for instance. Let's say, let's do a brick. Okay, that looks like that. Let's make it 1 foot so you can see it. And let's say this one, I was just going to say offset 1 foot. Okay, you notice that it's always disappearing. Every time when you draw something, it always disappears. So what happened is that in the view range, what you want is that you want to say, okay, view depth this has to be 1 foot. When we hit apply, that object will show up. Okay, so this
Hey,
is
Simon?
yes.
One thing I've just never comprehended is the difference between bottom
Yes.
and the
view depth.
other one.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's very confusing, but to keep it very straight, just make both of this number the same. Okay, I always do that because if you do that, you're not going to forget. Okay, because view depth, what happens is that what you want to see at the depth. The bottom is basically just showing you. It's basically the same thing except that okay, if let's say you put in this 0 and this 0, and then when you put this as -1, it says that error view depth is set above the yeah, that's always give me the error. So what I typically do is that if I set this -1, I would do the same thing through here. It's kind of funny. I don't know why they put this in, but I know that online there is a documentation mentioning what this is. I think in my documents, let me see if I have something. Yeah, let's see if I have anything in here called the view depth.
With those images?
Yeah, I think there's one explained it pretty well. There you go. So this is kind of like okay, this is the cut plane, this is the bottom, and then this is kind of like the where you want to offset it, right? So the bottom plane, that's where it's looked at. Now one of them will make it so that the bottom plane, for some odd reason, sometimes what it does is that it will highlight it mostly in gray tone, but I never got like a really good comprehensive why that bottom plane was put in place because it was just weird. I just never work. Okay, nobody online, nobody understand like why this is put in. It just basically it was put in there because it was it was very weird. Okay, so when they first designed the software, they got feedback from the user, and then this is what we get. They never fully explain the difference between the two. So what I did is I just basically make it both the same. Okay? All right. Now, some of the new feature, let me go into and just draw a bunch of wall. Okay? I'm not sure if you guys noticed that there is a new feature inside Revit. So when I go into here, okay, all you're seeing is just a flat elevation like that. So in here, in the graphical, let's see, where is it? Depth queuing, okay? You can click on show depth, and then anything that is far and near, and then fading limit, you can say, okay, whatever. And what happened is that this is kind of new. I think it's only happening in 2017. I believe I've seen this in 2016, only 17 onwards. So if you are using it, what this does is that it allows you to basically make certain things far away and certain things closer. Okay, so you could change that. So it's under here. Okay, graphic settings. It's one of those things that's really hidden inside Revit. So
you have to select that item to do this?
Yeah, basically what happens is that when you go show, it just say, okay, whatever's near, 100% if it's far. So let's say this one, I'm going to say, okay, just make it dark.
I mean, if we had like 2 walls.
Yes.
And then we would change that view depth.
Right.
Would that change the view depth for both of them, or we had to select which one we're applying to?
Okay, so if you are using it as a view template, it basically means that all the view templates are going to have the same thing. Okay? So this is only, I think elevation and section works this way as well. I could never get the settings to look correct. My way is that if you want to avoid doing this, the other way you could do is use this, right? So you could use annotation. Just fill in the region that you wanted, like the faded. Let's say, for example, I want this to be faded. So what I did is that this is probably the old tricks that I used to do it in the past, is that just change the surface transparency.
Just like Illustrator.
Yeah, that's the simplest way. So that's how you do
I
it.
did that.
Yeah, so that way you can get like, okay, what's far behind, then you just make it light, and whatever's closer is the dark. Because this, to me, this just makes completely no sense, but it's there, right? But Autodesk just never explained what this is. But every time I change this, it's always great.
I mean, it applies to all that wall?
Yes, that's correct. Well, I think what happened is that it's a relationship, right? So I'm going to go cancel. So basically, if it's if you
Closer,
move
if it's far.
closer to let's say to your elevation right here, right? So the closer you are,
It's darker.
it's darker. Yes. So
Okay.
this basically determines where your elevation lies in.
Right.
Okay, so this is why I said it's a hidden hit or miss. All right, they put it in there, but you guys are welcome to try it. But I just never find it to be very useful at the moment, right? Probably in the future it will be, especially when you're doing a really like funky little wall that has like different backgrounds and stuff like that. That makes more sense. But for now, the simplest way, if you want to do it, just use this fill region. Works fine. Okay. Any questions so far with that? All right.
No.
Okay. Moving on. So I'm just going to open up like a sample project. Okay. Let's see, content. So what I want to show is that sometimes I'm just going to use one of this sample project I've done. Now, what this project is, it's a tower, and the one thing that you guys have to understand is that in this kind of a particular project, sometimes the floor plate will not fit in your drawing. So a lot of time, what I do is that I have a plan that has like a enlarge, and what we do is that we use a lot of dependent views. So what that dependent view would do is that it basically is saying you have the parent view which has everything, and then what we're going to do is that we're going to split them into smaller pieces so that you can fit those smaller pieces onto a sheet.
So the question is, the reason you used that was that the main plan was not fitting on the sheet?
That's correct.
And the scale that you wanted to use?
Yes, that's correct. Let's say, for example, I'm using like a 1/4 inch. Like this is a perfect example. Okay, I'm just going to go into, let's say, a partial plan. So what we have in here is that we have a partial plan that looks like this. Okay, I forgot to load in all my drawing. Oops, my mistake. I should say yes, just say open. So what this does is that if you were to put this on a sheet, it's going to be larger than 3 by 4, arch E size. So this is what it looks like. So a lot of time what we do is that we split them up into smaller pieces. Okay. So this is kind of like the dependent view. How you do it is that you right click, you duplicate it, and you say duplicate as dependent. Okay. So what that does is that it allows you to basically split the views into smaller pieces, and you can just basically go in here and adjust where you want to crop it. Okay. This is very good, especially when you're doing like a large project. Rather than doing a call out, which a lot of people will tend to do, this one what does is that if anybody or a contractor is asking, oh, can you send me the whole plan? Okay, let's say I want this whole plan, then it's already there. Okay, you don't have to recreate that stuff. Because what happens is that when you do call out and they're asking for the whole plan, you kind of have to take that extra step to basically piece them all together at the end. Okay, so that's what the dependent views are there for. It's just to split them up so that you don't have to do a lot of that stuff. Now, the other advantage of using the dependent view is that you can actually convert them into independent view.
Can I ask you a question before we move?
Yeah, sure.
So, if the contractor asks us to send them the whole plan,
Yes.
and if we use call-out views, like 2 call-outs view, and then put them on a sheet, what's the advantage of using the dependent view?
Well, okay. The advantage of dependent views is that you're basically creating a view, like a subsection of this. And the other thing is that you're keeping track of, like, okay, what's been done to this view, okay? In here, what I did is that I keep record of all my SKs, okay? So you have a record stamp of saying that, okay, level 1 is going to have all this SK been made into this. So that this is all SK for the site instruction, and then the rest is like, okay, you got shaft plans. This one is the dependent, you can delete them.
I mean, but I still don't understand, like, this could be call-outs too, no?
Yes. The problem with callouts is that once you put a callout, it sticks to this plan. And what happened is that if let's say you made a mistake and you want to move that callout to somewhere else, like some other plans, you can't do it. Yeah, so it's fixed there, and you cannot move it to somewhere else. And that's the disadvantage of using callout, because callout just sticks there, and then that's it. It's not going to go anywhere. So if you put it in like I noticed in several projects where user put callouts in 1/16 plan for their detail, and when I try to find it, it's very difficult. And then I'm noticing that okay, this callout appears in this view, and then no other views is going to exist. So that's the disadvantage of using simply callout. So I'm going to show you like kind of how I do callouts in this, let's say this large project. All right. So in this particular one, what I have is that I have a plan, and then I just basically created, let's say if you want to do like a core plans, etc. I would just say duplicate this view and create your own, let's say, non-interior elevation. Let's see, where's my plan? Oh, there you go. So in here, I'll just go in, double click on this. So what you're seeing is that it's just a plan, except that in here, it has its own little, niche kind of a plan. So I'm not technically using callout. I'm just basically using a plan, a large plan, and then I just go in and just crop the view and then just tag them in. The also nicest thing about this is that you're not dimensioning all over the place. You're just basically keeping it to that particular view, and then you just basically dimension that. Okay? It's a very good system. Once you understand it, all I have to do is that I only got one plan that has all its views, okay, all kept within that level.
As soon as you create a dependent, it will go under that.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say, for example, I have this, and then I'm going to create a callout. Okay, go view and create a callout, right? It's going to basically say, oh, this is a callout here, right there, and it's going to be independent. Okay. We have a lot of this issue where we don't know where that callout belongs to, so we don't know what level they're in. Most of the time, people say this is going to be stair,
Right.
yeah, level 1 or something, right? That's kind of like, how people would do it within callout. But you don't even know that if that thing is callout or not, right? So every time when people start renaming stuff, it's very difficult to keep track of that, okay? This is why callout, I just never use it in a larger project. Smaller project, if you have like, let's say 2-story, like amenity or something like that, callout works fine. Now, the other thing about callout is that if you are doing, let's say, a stair, let's say, for example, in this, and you want to do a callout here, let's say, for example, you want to do callout here, and then go in here, that's fine. I mean, if this is the only unique detail, and you want to do it, and saying, okay, this is the kind of like the most unique detail, that's fine. Callout, you can use that. But once you get into more of repetitive objects, right, then that's where callout should not be used. Because you can get into very difficult places to find, oh, where's this callout belong to, or where's that callout belong to. The one way I typically do it for callouts is referencing, I'm just going to get rid of this, okay? Now, one thing and you notice is that every time I delete that callout, that view gets deleted. So there's no control. Okay, because people can accidentally say, oh, what is this callout doing here? Just hit delete, and then guess what? It relates to a view, and it gets deleted. So one of the way I'm doing it for callouts is that I kind of click on this and say reference to a view. Okay, and in here I could say stair. Just find that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say for example I just want to put that as my detail, and I just say, okay, that's my detail right there. Now the benefit of this is that you could actually copy this and to multiple locations, so it doesn't have to be stick to this particular location. You can say, okay, copy this, and then I'm gonna go to another stair. Okay, let's say what's a good section here. I'm just gonna go in here, go to view, and then let's say I'm gonna. Oh yeah, it just doesn't let me. Yeah, there's a difference between plan and section. Okay, sometimes callout does not like to do it inside a section, but plan it works well. So maybe I should demonstrate just more for the plan. Let's say, for example, you do a callout, okay, and then you say you reference to another view, and you say, okay, stair. I'm just going to type in stair, and let's say, for example, this is just like any stairs, and then you just say, okay, this is my callout. Now, if you want this callout to repeat itself in, let's say, the other level, all I have to do is just go copy. Okay, let's say I'm going to go P5. Okay, let's say the same location. All I have to do here is that I'm just going to say paste same place. Okay, notice that it basically carries over those same information. Now you kind of have to be careful. Let's say, for example, if you say paste current view, it's just going to give you a straight callout. It doesn't do anything. So that's kind of like one of those weird quirks that you guys have to kind of be aware of, right? It has to be saying same place. Then what happened is that it's going to paste the same place, and it's going to put in that stupid thing. I don't know why. This is the only glitch I've found so far. But if you're doing like a multi-story kind of like tower where the cores are the same, this is kind of like the method that I've used a lot. So basically create one callout reference to this view, and then what you do is that you copy it and you paste. So you don't have to redo all that tagging, because every time when you do this callout tagging, right, this guy in reference to view, it's a lot of clicks. Whereas if you copy that, paste,
Yeah.
much faster.
It's usually hard to find the related view in that list.
Yes, that's correct. So this is why when you're doing a lot of the views, make sure you have very specific what you want. Let's say, for example, in here I say townhouse 4, TH4 stairs. Then when you do a call out, you know that this is TH4, then you just say TH4, and then it will just grab you those two related stair. Okay? It's kind of like a couple ways, like the naming of the view is very important so that you can filter it very fast. Okay? Any questions so far? No? All right. Yeah, I'm just going to basically just showcase like some of the issues with some of the views that if you do encounter this is kind of like how you kind of break away from it. Now, I know that some of you guys will use the jogging mechanism. Okay, so let's say, for example, you have an elevation. I'm just going to go to a plan. Okay, let's say I want to do this part of elevation right here, okay, with this really weird. So what happened is that sometimes what people would do is that when they create a section, and what happened is that they would use this called the split segment. So you have the jog, okay? When you click on the jog, let's say I want this view, and then this view, I just say, I'm just going to extend it outside. Okay, this is fine and dandy. Okay, this is good. Now, yeah, let's say that is huge. So I'm just going to edit the crop. Now, once you start duplicating the pendant on a section, that's where this thing will go haywire. Okay? So let me just make it, come on. It's going to go down and just, yeah, hopefully this mouse works. Okay. It's going to go up here. Good. In one particular project, I'm noticing that one user did this. And what section is this? So I just want to make sure. Section 35. Okay, so I'm going to go find section 35. 35. Next. Okay. So most of the time what people do is that they just say, okay, I'm going to duplicate as a dependent. Now what happens is that when you start doing it, sometimes what happens is that your dragging cursor will not work. Okay, this has happened quite a bit. So if you this time it works fine, but you will encounter that where when you try to drag this, it would just stuck in that location. It would not go. Okay, so how I fixed it was that you kind of have to remove that. You have to remove this jog. Okay, you kind of have to like basically just move this. Yeah. Once you have too many objects, sometimes it interferes. So what you have to do is that you kind of have to, come on. Yeah, you notice that right now it's just not working. Oh, you know what? I think what happened is that when you have a dependent, you notice that it just would not move. Let's say if I want to delete this, okay, just delete the dependent. Oh yeah, that's what it is. So what happens is that every time when you create a dependent, it creates another tags on top of that. Just something to keep in mind. Because right now, is this the one? Yeah, that's the one. And what you're going to do is that isolate it. Just move it back to normal. Okay? Then you can just do crop. Okay? So if you do encounter that where certain things just would not move, then do this, right? Just figure out whether there's a section that has a jog, because the jog will prevent a crop factor to move anywhere. So that's like basically one of the anomalies of when you're dealing with Revit View. Okay, any questions so far with like any quirks?
I have a question. Probably you mentioned at the beginning, like
Yes.
the working views and sheet views. Just
Right. Okay. So what happens is that I know in certain projects they have like working views and sheet views, correct? The problem with Revit is that the more views you created, it basically adds more file size to the project, and sometimes it balloons your file probably about 10 to 20%. So if you're really if your model is really slow, right? The first thing it would do is that get rid of those work in progress views, like working views. I always treat the working views as kind of like one of those views that you're gonna get rid of in future. But in most cases, what I find out is that most cases people don't delete them. It's just kept in there. And you will notice that in this particular project, I cleaned this so many times, is that people will create their own copy views. But in this particular one, I did clean them up, right? What I have is that majority of the time, if you wanted to create like a reference view, you would create a level that has everything in there. Okay, let's say for example, this is like 40-story tower. What I did is I create all the levels and place them under what I call the source reference view. And what user can do is that it can just go in there, and then they can treat this as work in progress view. Now, some people say they might disagree with this stuff, and I'm fine with that. You could create your own if you think that you're gonna mess it up, right? Most cases, what you're copying the views for is that you basically are doing some detailed line work that is unique to that view. But most cases, if you are doing model, I don't see any point of doing it unless that person's not going to give up their view, right? And that's where you can see people clashing.
and I've also seen like working views being used where you want to like add your questions in red on the sheet.
That's correct.
I mean, what's the best practice really to have a view that is always clean for the sheet and a view that you can just communicate on?
All right. So typically, the question relate to that is that if let's say you have a question, you want to like relate to it. Where's the best place to put those question mark? Most of the time, I just say if you want a question mark, put it on a sheet, on the sheet view, because that's where you're gonna get printed out the most, because that's where the end product's going to be. Every time we print it out, that red mark is gonna keep reminding you that somebody done that. I know it's.
Yes, but I mean, if someone wants the print, we don't want all those red questions to be printed.
That's correct. Now, so how I would do things is that in the revision, you would create one called the cloud off, right? So basically, it will not show any clouds. So if those red marks are done, you basically put them in there, and then what it does is that it will just hide the clouds. Okay, that's kind of like one way of doing things. If let's say you want to cloud certain things, I know that sometimes what you want is that in the view you want to basically see it, and then you can just put it in. So yes, you could technically do it in let's say your sheet view. Let's say this is the sheet view. and then this is the plan, and then you want to highlight where that area going to be, that's fine. That's the best place to put in. It's not good to put it somewhere else where it's only for you, because what tends to happen is that nobody checks it, and the only place that people check is usually the sheet view. Okay, this is the view that people normally check, and then this is kind of like the view that everybody should go to. So what happens is that when you communicate within, let's say, a larger team, this view becomes kind of like essential for people to, let's say, if you're going to do red marking, put it in there. Okay, that's just kind of like my strategy, is that always put it here so everybody can see it. If you create your own working view and you just put it in there, nobody knows where it is.
Well, I think the way we have been doing it in Vial is that we don't create our own working view, but there is one working view for every view that is on a sheet. So,
Okay.
and then we are supposed to work on the working views.
Okay. Yes and no. Well, it depends. I mean, it depends on how Vial would set it up, right? In my way of kind of like approaching it, you try to do less. The less view you have to deal with, the better your end result going to be. If someone made a mistake, it's basically either going to be in working view or the sheet view, right? The more views you put it in, sometimes the newer user just would not know where it is. They assume that, I'm working on working views. I put all my tags there. You want me to dimension? They put it in working views. Sometimes that logical things to like people think that this is the view that I have to work on, and people start dimensioning stuff, and then where's the dimension for the sheet view? It's like I put it on my working view, so there's that big confusion going on. So we want to eliminate that as much as possible. If it's possible, try to keep it as less as possible. If for working views, I would just say probably do more like this. You have a source view. This is all kind of like your working views. This is kind of like how for me, if I want to analyze what's wrong with your model, first thing I want to do is that I want all the levels to be in there so I can see exactly what's going on. So let's say, my level 42 is missing columns. Can you help me recover it? First I look at level 42, see what's going on, and then I go to the 3D model, look at level 42, what's going on, and then I just piece things together much easier. If you don't show me all the views, you only show me the sheet views, chances are I have no idea what's going on. So this is why, for me, for an analytical side, I like to have all the views shown like this so that you know exactly where you have. And this, to me, you could treat this as kind of like your working view. Nobody should be working on it, but it's just a way to kind of orient your building so that, this is like working view, pretty much. You can just go in there.
And they are deletable, right?
You can delete them, but I treat them as a kind of a source view, because the reason why it's a source view is that it has to relate to this, right? We do not want people to mess up renaming the level here, because what happened is that I do see people renaming the actual physical sheet view and call it overall level 1, and then once you go into the elevations in here, it basically says overall level 1, and it's very annoying.
Yeah.
So what happened is that this should be in there, okay? So how do you know if this view is source view? Is that, let's say if you say temp, let's say, or you could say this is working, right? Level 10 working. It will tell you this, right? It will tell you this. This is how you tell if it's a source view. Source view is going to be, what I mean by source view is that it's the first view inside Revit. Whenever there's the first view in Revit, it always will display this particular message. Okay? Now, once you delete this, Revit will move on to the next view that was created. So it could be the sheet view becomes your new source view. So you see where this can get really, really messy once you get like a larger team, larger projects, where you want to keep all those views very consistent so that you don't have people start changing stuff and then it does really weird things. This is where you need to create all the source view and keep it as kind of like this is your working view that people can go in and manipulate and do whatever. Okay, does that make sense, sort of?
Yeah.
So, guys in Seattle, does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully that kind of helped you guys understand kind of like how working views in the future, this is how I would say approach it, is that we have all the source views. So you have, like, let's say if you created 50 floors, then you're going to have 50 levels of that. Now I take this even for, I basically create all the source views, the working views inside this, and also do it for ceiling as well, and all the area plans as well. So anything that you're creating, because the level itself is very finicky. The minute that you start renaming one of these, it will rename that. Okay, even ceiling plan. If you rename a ceiling plan, someone will accidentally do that. So it's a good idea to basically create. If you know that you're going to be using area plans, let's say gross building or saleable, and ceiling plans, then just create all the views simultaneously, just to prevent people from renaming stuff. Okay, and then I treat this as kind of like the working views. People can just go in there and just say, okay, look at this, and then copy stuff, and just make it a little bit easier for them. So you no longer have to create all this bunch of working view, because working view is just, to me, is just, it's not really a working, right? It's just a view that people can come in and go, and that's it. And what happens is that we want to eliminate a lot of this working views, because the more views you create, the more it takes up space for Revit.
Hey, Simon.
Yes.
What I'm seeing here is kind of different than what we've been doing, at least in this office. So
Sure.
if this develops further, we should
Sure.
roll it out, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like once you start doing it, smaller projects, you can get away. Let's say, for example, if you're building a small house or like a facility that is like 2 levels, then we don't care about the source views or anything. So you could just do it right directly on it, because this project, it really depends on project size. Because the larger the project, the view gets crazier and crazier, and then we don't have time to go in to manage all this stuff. Versus if you're doing a smaller size project, then it's easy to manage. You don't have to create a lot of views. I'll show you a small project later on when I copy the camera views. So it really depends on sizing, right? The small projects, yes, just don't follow this example. Larger projects, you kind of have to do this, set it up, So I just wanted people to kind of be aware, like the scope of the project depends on what you can use and what you cannot use. So, all right. So one thing I'm going to demonstrate is that, let's say you create like some sort of camera views that you want. Okay, not the framework, sorry. So let's say, for example, Revit view samples. So let's say, for example, this is your old building. Okay, it has 3-story buildings. This is a kind of like a small projects that I've done, kind of like in the past. So in here, you notice that, okay, level 1, I go in here. Okay, I do have my own source view. But if you have like a really small projects that's like 3 levels, you don't have to create that source view that I've created. I just like, I'm so used to it. You could just go in here and then just basically scrap that source view and then just go straight into, floor plans. But in this particular one, the reason why I did it, it's more to do with there's differences that what the city wants. So what I have to do is that this is kind of like the view that they want, and I have floor plans, Okay, so let's say this is kind of like the camera you want to use. Okay, let's say this is the camera view you want to use. When you open up another project, let's say, for example, I have the new building. Okay, let's say this is my new building. It's 2-story. And then I want to have the same sort of like the camera angle for this. In the past, what people would do is that they recreate the camera. But when you do rendering, that camera is off slightly. So that's a big challenge for us in the past. So what I find out is that you can actually copy it in the camera view. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you how I copy it in this camera view. So first of all, you're just going to select this, okay? Go to like a floor plan or something. Okay, so let's say this is your camera. Copy this, okay? So let's go to new building. Now in here, to get it to the right position, you have to paste it into elevation 0. Okay, that's Revit elevation 0. if you try to paste it in to the current view, I'm just going to move this slightly over. Say, for example, I'm going to basically say select a line. Let's say I'm going to paste it. Oh, this is level 1. Oh, I think that's level 1. Then when I go to the view, works fine. Looks good. But in certain cases, if you levels are different, there's a problem. I noticed that in my past project where I did the same thing. I just say paste level 1. But the problem with the level 1 is that it's changed a lot in the project. When I paste it in, it no longer stays the same. Okay? The camera kind of shifted up or down. Okay? So something that users just have to be aware of. But if you want to get it to the right location, I'm just going to get rid of that. Okay? The best place is that when you place selected level, make sure you have like a level like 0 in there. So if you don't have it, just create one. Okay? Okay, so how you create it, it's pretty simple. So let's say I'm going to cut a section. My section.
Oh, I see. So you just create a level.
Yeah, just create a level. Okay, my section's in there. I'm just going to create a level. Building section. Okay? And all you have to do is, if let's say this is your, you want to figure out where your level 0. Okay? All you have to do, I'm just going to undo that. Just draw a piece of detail line and put this, just put some sort of spot elevation right there and just say hit 0. There we go. So that's basically where you're going to be at. And what you're going to do is that you're going to basically copy this. Copy this all the way down to the detail line. So that's how you tell. Okay? So let's say I'm going to say this is elevation 0. Or you can say whatever, right? Sea level. Okay? And then what you're going to do here is that when you paste in special, there's elevation 0. Okay? Where's my awesome camera view? All right, this doesn't work. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't know why. Because in 2016, before then, this is the only way you get it work, right? Because what happens is that if both sides have the same 0, 0, when you paste them in, it will come in the right. So
Did the other one have the 0 now?
I don't think it has anything. So it could be that there's something. It could be that when this level and that level has the same level 1, when you paste them in, works the same. Okay. In certain cases, when you have a building that the elevation changes, then yeah, it doesn't work. Very weird, but yeah, it's very strange because like I tried it before, it works fine. This is basically before 2016, right? When we have a building that is that has different elevations, and what happens is that you cannot rely on the elevation 1 because when you paste them into that elevation 1, basically it changes the height in relation to level 1. So what I did is that I create level 0, and I select that and say copy from level 0, and you go back in there, paste it into the same level 0, it pastes it in and place it in the right location. So I guess the thing about this is that you have to make sure that both of those files have the same level consistently. So when you paste on one level to the other, it will just fit it in the right location. Okay, so that's basically the trick for today for this, right? Now there's other tricks I should show you guys. When you're doing a dimension, let's say for example, I'm not sure if you guys know this trick. Yeah, that's fine. All right, so let's say for example, you want to hide certain portion of your tags or something in here, right? You don't want to delete this, you just want to hide it. You can go right click and just say, okay, I want to hide this element. But there's another way you can actually hide stuff. So what you can do is that you can go in here and create your own, let's see, annotate. Let's see if I have a masking. Masking. No, I don't have it. Okay, so let me just create one, a very simple family. Now, in here, what you can do is that you could create a generic annotation family. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a masking region. Very simple. Say 10 by 20, that's fine. Now, alright, so I'm going to call this X and I'm going to call that Y. So X, instance parameter. Y, instance parameter, I'm just going to say that's Y. And I'm going to make that invisible. Just making sure that this is locked to that. Okay? And then what you could do here is that I'm just going to load it in. I'm not going to call new buildings. Sure. Okay. So in here, basement, let's say you want to hide that stuff. Now what you could do here is that I'm just going to place it here. You notice that's going to hide stuff. Okay? This is a good way if you want to hide certain information. Now, the nicest thing about this is that when you do masking region, let's say for example, we use this masking region. Let's say you want to hide that stuff. Invisible line. You notice that the tag will always be on top. So when I create that symbols masking region, what it does is that it will hide stuff. It would hide your any mistake or anything that you don't think it's correct. So it hides dimension. It will also hide grids as well. Okay? So that's kind of like, you know, a good way to kind of hide stuff. Let's say, for example, you have a view that you want to crop off, right, just to put in like your schedule. Then just use this, right? So rather than doing a crop where you have to hide stuff, all you have to do is just go 12 by 6. Oh, that's too big. So let's see, 1 by 0.5. Okay. Let's say if you want to hide a portion of your thing just to fit in your schedule in this corner, then this is how I would do it. Any questions so far? Seattle?
Nope.
All right. Yeah, those are basically the small extension of the views. Probably in the future, I'll probably discuss more on the view templates. I won't get too much because I think that's a lot of information. But today, I'm just basically showing you kind of like the quirkiness of the views and what you can do to kind of like overcome some of these challenges. And also, you know, if you want to hide like certain, let's say for example, I know that when I look at the template, some of the unreferenced view tags get hidden, which I find it to be very strange. The reason why I say it's fun and strange is that you don't have to do that because when you start printing, that's fine. When you start printing, in here when you go set up, you notice that hide unreferenced view tag. Okay? It would do it automatically in a print mode, so I'm not sure why you need to hide that in a filter. It just makes no sense. But if you do,
Simon, we hide it in the filter just for working. Sometimes they're just distracting because there's just so many of them.
Right.
And so I actually like to hide it just so I can see what I'm doing.
Sure. Okay. But if you do run into that kind of a problem, the other way you can do it is that rather than putting a building section, you can say, okay, it's a DP, or you can say temporarily, whatever. Then what it does is that it basically filter out that stuff and just put it in there. The other thing you could do is that if you want to hide that, you notice that hide scale coarser, you can actually say, okay, I want to hide coarser than 1/2 inch, and what it does is that will not show up. Okay, so if your scale is 1/4 inch, and then that particular symbol says it's at 1/4 inch, it will not show up. Okay, that's a couple of ways of you can hide stuff rather than using the unreferenced view tags. Because I noticed that when someone wants to do like a call out just to reference to a detail, they can't do it because they keep hiding them. And I just told them that just get rid of that stuff for now. So when they get rid of that, they show like about 20 different call outs. So it was annoying. Yes, but so this is kind of like how I would overcome it. So if you don't want to show it. Now, sometimes what happens is that user will get, like, let's say you have this section, right? And then you want to reference it, let's say, twice in a project. So what I typically do is that if this particular section appears multiple times, I think this is, what section is that? DD, okay? So let's say, for example, I want to duplicate that as a dependent, okay? And then put it on a sheet. So what happened is that...
Hey Simon,
yes.
Seattle has to sign off, but thanks for the
tips.
fun.
All right, no problem.
All right, see you guys.
See ya. So what happened, you could do this, is that you could actually put it there and put it there. So what you have is that you're going to have two of this at a different interval. Okay? This is kind of like some of the tricks that I've used. All right, hopefully that covers it for today. If you have any questions, just let me know.